work, I just want to ask this question: what type of problem they may face?
Bullying, abuse,
Mhm.
um, so many, yeah, bullying, abuse, just so many different things.
Harassment.
Harassment.
Yes.
What else? It's okay to answer. If you're right or wrong, that's fine. Just like if you think that when you go to workplaces, yes.
Pay issues where
Like
like the pay is
wages.
delayed, yeah.
Right, unpaid wages.
Yeah, or
Okay.
unpaid work based on unpaid training.
Mhm. Right. What else? How about sorry? Having some issues with co-workers.
The hours maybe?
Hours, like paying hours. Anything else? How about health and safety? Like if you may get injured, like sometimes you're not feeling safe at workplaces. Okay, like there's no heater, there's no like AC, or there's like the machine. If somebody is working in a factory, like the equipment is not safe. So these kind of issues, there's tons of issues possible at workplaces. But what happens here in like a workplace when an employee goes to work? When they see all these this possible of this problem, there are like not only one law is protecting workers from these kind of issues. There are more than one law is protecting workers from these kind of issues. For example, if somebody is getting injured at workplaces or having issues like in terms of health and safety, so to cover to protect them from these kind of issues, there is a law called Health and Safety Act. So that is completely a different one. Second, if someone goes to workplaces and being treated differently based on their color, religion, ethnic origin, and extra. So that is not allowed in Ontario. So to protect workers from this kind of discrimination, there's an act called Human Rights. So workers are protected by the Human Rights Act to be treated equally, right? And the other one, the wages issue, right? If you see that workers are not being paid for trainings or not getting vacation pay and etc. etc. So this is covered. I mean, it comes under the Employment Standard Act, right? So today, I'm going to talk about the Employment Standard Act, not about the human rights. That's a completely big topic. So I won't be talking. I will not be talking about that. And the health and safety, there's the other one, which I'm not going to talk about that one. But I have some fact sheet, and we may have make some copies. Like if you want to know more about human rights, you can find out that. But I'm going to talk about the Employment Standard Act, what your rights are under the Employment Standard Act. So that's what I'm going to talk today. And you need to know, in Ontario, the other thing is that I already mentioned that about 90% of workplaces are covered by the provincial law, right? But among these workplaces, there are certain number of workplaces are unionized. The majority of workplaces are non-unionized workplaces. So what happens if you're working in a workplace which is provincially covered, but there's a union? If there's a union, then you are not, I mean, the Employment Standard Act wouldn't apply directly to the workers. So they will have a collective agreement. So employees have to follow the collective agreement, which is a little better than the Employment Standard Act. But then for the non-unionized workplace, or for workers, they are covered by the Employment Standard Act, right? So the first thing under the Employment Standard Act, what our rights are. So that's what I'm going to talk. All right. Any questions before I begin? About
You mentioned about campaigning earlier for
minimum wage.
minimum wage.
Mhm.
Where does it stand in that discussion?
Definitely, I will explain when I talk about the campaign.
Yes.
I'll come to that one. Okay.
And is it legal for someone, some employer to be paying employees, non-union employees, $12 an hour?
But I will talk about the rest one. I will definitely
Adults.
cover about this one. Yes.
You know that, okay, yeah, health safety legislation, I know it's been implemented, but like, I think things like, bullying and all, and, harassment, and which I know you're not covering, I feel like it's very, you have to be walking on eggshells when you're not in that situation, because even though you're covered, and you do mention it, like, and you try to protect yourself from it and you address it, bosses can try to like fire you for different reasons for that, and so you'll never, I think it's risky to even say something. And the thing is that I think that the bigger organizations, like bigger corporations, they have laws that actually govern or, they have laws that actually protect you from that, but the small organizations, they can get away with it. So I don't know how effective those kinds of laws are, even though I know we're not addressing it, but.
No, it's really good point. That's why the Workers' Access Center, we've been fighting to like, make sure that these laws are enforced and making sure that, the workers have voices, because we completely, that's why we get a lot of calls, that we see there's a lot of bullying or harassments going on, but there's no, like, they don't have enough proof to like fight for it, or like, employers easily to get away from that, right? So, it is, we like, I agree with that. That is not really strong law that we have right now, but currently the Employment Standard Act has been reviewed, is being reviewed, because after 12 years, 15 years, so they're reviewing it. So we are hoping that the new ESA will come with like more rights and like with more strong protection for workers, but we don't know yet, right? But we completely agree that it's not really strong enough, and that is still, there's a lot of problems going on, especially like with the harassment, bullying, that we get a lot of calls. We see that even ourselves, we don't have like much answer for them to say, well, well, you have to do only thing that we can advise them to like document everything properly. Then we will sit down with them to like prepare for the next step, that kind of things. But if they come to us in like early stage, but we can discuss further about that in academic situations. But again, even myself personally, I don't see that as strong protection yet for that. All right. Okay. So that's for the okay. Let's go to the Employment Standard Act. So we're going to begin with that. So let me ask you the question: why we all are going to work? Need money. Okay, we all need money.
Yeah.
Okay, so how much you eat then? How much you need?
No limit.
Right. Okay, let's talk about if you wanted to earn like hourly rate, right? How much would like to earn per hour?
Reasonable hour wage.
It's okay. I'm not going to pay you, so you can
That's
say
it.
whatever.
Yeah, something that I can lead a decent life.
Right.
Yeah.
The
Now,
number, right?
another thing is like decent life is different for different people.
Right.
It actually, it's based on people's expectation. But yeah, at least, I can have my food, I can afford a house, or maybe I can afford my rent. A car, because car is a necessity, not a luxury here, at least one car. Yeah, good life for children.
Roughly, like, can you tell me the number for an hour? It's okay.
Well, if I can tell about myself.
Yeah, sure,
Like,
that's
I
fine.
think, if my earning is, let's say, between 2,000 and 2,500 a month, it's gonna be like more than good for me, I would say.
Right, like between per an hour is about,
Should be like 18.
It would be
$18?
around, yeah, well, it would be somewhere, yeah, that's too high, I know.
Which is, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little high, I know, like to start with, but even like anywhere between 15 and 16
15 to
should be
16.
fair for
Decent.
a family with children, I would say.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm. How about others?
Any job with number of risk, or any type of risk involved, risk to your health, risk to your life, should be paying something between 18 and 22,000.
18 to 22.
Even if it's not unionized.
Right.
I'm thinking also of the inflation, inflation rate. For now, for example, now the groceries are hiking up.
Yes, yes.
And if I was being paid 18 will not work now.
Right.
So, yes,
Exactly. Mhm.
yeah. So I'm having in mind this.
Price
Inflation, yeah,
Inflation,
definitely, I'll talk
yeah.
about that. Anything else, any other answers? Doesn't matter, you don't need money?
It looks like,
Yeah,
yeah, it looks like 16 to 20, like.
16 to
yeah,
20 is
yeah,
a reasonable,
like,
right?
Yeah,
Right.
like you think about like what a doctor gets paid for like one patient, particularly in the fashion, that's like 25, but that's like something like obviously like in a different ballpark, but $11, I think is current minimum wage. That I think is still like lower. I remember I worked with, at the clinic, I used to work with this lady who actually helped, enforce that, the higher wage, but it still seems low.
Yeah, the minimum wage right now, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
40 hours, it's nothing.
That's
And
right.
it's hard to get a full-time job, so you don't even know whether you're gonna get 40 hours or not. It's
Mhm.
usually like 2 days, 3 days maximum.
Right.
So, yeah.
How about others? No answers? Matter? Okay, so what happens? We all want higher wages. But what happens to employer? Right, when it comes to an employer, they don't want to pay you high. They always wanted to pay you less. So what happens here where the employment standard comes, right? And saying to the employer, well, you know, you have to have like, you know, certain, like the bottom line, not to pay less than certain amount. So that is called minimum wage in Ontario. Do you know what's the minimum wage in Ontario?
11.25.
11.25?
11.50 or 11.25?
11.50? Okay, let's figure it out.
Yeah, most of the agencies.
Okay, so let's find out that. Here you go. Right?
Yeah, 11.25.
So 11.25 is the general minimum wage, but there are some exceptions, right? For students, the minimum wage is 10.55, and for liquor servers, the minimum wage is 9.80, and like, you know, for other workers, that's the minimum wage.
Oh, what is this? 56.30?
What's the $9 for?
The liquor service.
9 something?
Yes.
Right? So, the thing is that what happens here, what happens, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history of minimum wage, as we're talking about the minimum wage, and also there was a good point. What happened in the last over 10 years, the minimum was not increased, right, probably. So they just increased once in a while. The Workers' Action Center, we had campaign, like it was a province like campaign with the allies, and we were able to, like that time back in 2006 or 7, I don't remember exactly the year. We had campaigned to increase the minimum wage to $10 at the time. It was very low than that, and then finally that time government agreed that if they came to power, they would increase to like not in the same time, but like they would increase per every year by 30%. So that's why they ended up with increasing to 10.25 back in 2010. That was the amount. Then since then, they didn't increase for the last 4 years until last year. So then we had another campaign again to increase the minimum wage for $14, which is the reason why we're asking $14 is that we knew every time when the minimum wage goes up, it was not really above the poverty line, always below the poverty line. But in the not the last year, the previous years, we had the campaign $14. This year we have $15. So $15 is the meaning is above 16% above the poverty line. If somebody is earning $15 per hour, so that means you're above the poverty line. The current minimum wage is still leaving the people below the poverty line. So that is not enough. That's why we all feel that, right? But what happened? As part of the campaign, we had another demand. We don't want to come every year and asking the government or pushing the government to increase the minimum wage to a certain amount. So we asked, because every prices were going up, but how come the minimum wage is not going up? So that's why we asked inflation, right? So finally, they agreed last year that we would increase the minimum wage every year based on inflation. It is really good. That was a huge victory in the first time in history. So that's why the minimum wage went up last year to $11.25. This year also is going to go up, but again it will be increased every 1st of October every year, and they will announce by April of every year how much it's going to be, right? So we can expect more, raise in the minimum wage this year as well. But again, it doesn't really make sense because I mean, the minimum wage is still very low. And then, increasing from that, it doesn't really make sense. So we're still pushing the government. Again, we are calling for the $15. I'll talk about the campaign later. Right, so any questions about this one? Okay, no. So we may have some question here about students' minimum wage. But the other area I get a lot of questions. Then who is the student, right? What is the meaning of students? Because sometimes if you go to classes, I'm a student. Can my employer pay me $10.55? No, not really. So let me show you what is the definition students mean. Right? So students mean you must be 18 years old and works 28 hours a week or less when school is in session, or work during a school break or summer holidays. For those, that's the definition for students. And liquor service and candy, hunting and fishing guide, minimum wage, and home workers. So you can see if anybody wants, that I can give you that definition. Then we'll go to the next one. Okay, so that was the minimum wage. The other question we normally get, what is the minimum age for workers, right? When you employ, after how many years old you can work. So this is the chart, so you can see, actually it's starting from 14 years old, but not for all works, right? For if you're going to work at stores or offices or the area that you can work after 14 years old. And for, you can see that, right? So that's also.
What kind of work is for 14 years?
Like stores and offices, like if you're going to work as a, in any office, it could be office assistants or that kind of things, you're allowed to work. Right. All right. So now, this scenario, I just wanted to, can someone read this one? Yes, this one.
Mary was hired as a server at a bar. Her boss told her that she will receive minimum wage. Mary's first 2 days, 10 hours total, at work was for training. Her boss told her that she will not be paid for those days. Is Mary owed any wages for what? Yeah, she's owed wages.
She's owed. How about others?
Yeah.
Why?
Because she was there.
She worked.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Similar to
what?
trainings, if she was there, she did work.
The trend is working.
Right, so the question is basically whether the training is paid or not, right? What happens, the workers' actions, and we received tons of calls regarding this. Was not many employers to pay for workers for the training that's happening in Ontario. But if this is your rights, you have rights to get paid for training. The employer must pay you for the training, right? Regardless of how many hours you work, how many hours you get training, but still you have rights to get the college to pay for the training. So it's really, really important. Okay, any questions?
I have a question. If there was an agreement in place between the employee and the employer that even if it is just verbal, that the training is not paid, and then she worked 2 days, 10 hours, and then she let her go, could she claim, even if it was verbal, not written agreement?
Yes, because even though it is, any agreement cannot break the law, right?
Mhm.
So that is against the law, and even if that's a verbal, again, always it's okay, if you and your employer having any agreement and both are agreed, that's fine. But if it comes to a conflict, and if employee wants to climb in that case, yes, definitely they can do that. They can do that. Right? There's supposed to be this-
Do you get paid in job shadowing also?
Sorry?
Job shadowing, do you get paid for that also?
It depends, right? So let's say if what happens usually, the training means that you have to perform, you have to do the works that is more related to the job that you're going to get. Let's say if you are working in a restaurant, and if your employer is giving you training that you're cooking something, you're actually making the food, right? So the actual job is being done. So in that kind of category, they would consider that that's proper training. But when it comes to shadowing, it's 50-50. Sometimes, like, we may say that it's not really like training. So what happens, I can share some example here in this case. Recently I got a call from a restaurant workers who were asked to, the employer said to them that, well, you're hired, but however, that you're not going to begin your job until 1 week from now, but you are, welcome to come and learn, right, what's going on. Even though they said that, they didn't have a choice to refuse that. But they made as mandatory, you have to come, right? So if they didn't go, they didn't, they were not hired. That's first thing. And second thing is that if they didn't go on, they made a schedule for that. So they did everything properly, but verbally they said, it's not, you don't need to come, but if you don't want to. But at the same time, if they don't show up on the schedule, they're making mistakes. So in that kind of situation, employer can play little, different roles to escape from this kind of issues. But in that situation, we would sit down with the employees and try and find out more what happened, what type of work they did, and what type of agreement they are, and then we will figure out whether it is actual training or not. But in some cases, if the employer is saying that, well, this is up to you, you can come, or you can learn if you want. If not, that's fine. In that kind of things, that if you're going to shadow, then it's sort of voluntarily you're doing it. You are choosing to go. But if it is mandatory, yes, they have to. Right? You have a question?
Job shadowing means like volunteer?
Means that, you want to explain that?
Job shadow.
Like, let's say someone is working and you are watching them to
watching
like
them
what
do.
they are doing.
Yeah,
Let's say-
observant,
Yeah,
observant.
So you are basically shadowing somebody who already
Basically
knows
it's
what
training.
they're
Doing the
doing.
job.
Yeah, it's actually a training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a word.
Okay, so I'm going to move to this one, the next one, training and pay, right? The thing is that for the training, what I'm saying here, sorry, excuse me, the employer can pay you less than your actual pay. Means that if you're hired, like if your employer is saying that we will pay you $15 per hour, but for the training, they can pay you less than that until you start your actual job. But that the less pay cannot be below the minimum wage, right? So let's say my employer has hired me for $15, but I'm getting training for a week. My employer can pay me at least the minimum is $11.25 or more. Okay? Any questions? All right. So this is sample pay stuff. I hope it's clear. Just going to move to this one. If anybody want to know, you already know what is the pay stub, right? Okay, so that's right. Sometimes I do. Yeah, okay. Let me move to the next one. Anybody else supposed to volunteer to read this one? All right, maybe I'll go to the next year and then we have more. Yes.
The next week, Mary came into work for a 5-hour shift, but her boss told her that it was a slow day and sent her home right away. Is Mary owed any wages?
Yes, she does. I think she does for 3 hours because she showed up for work.
Any other answers? But she didn't do any work.
Yeah, but she came for her schedule and it was not her fault.
Mhm.
So she showed up for work.
Okay. All right.
I think he can't send her home right away.
Well, they can send.
They can.
Yes,
Yeah.
they can send, but if they send, whether they should be paid or not, right? So that's the second thing.
Minimum window is 3 hours.
3 hours. Okay. You guys are good. There you go. All right. So 3 hours rules. Yes. The employer has to pay you at least 3 hours. Right? Again, this is the other area that we get a lot of calls, right? So not many employees are doing that. But if you know your rights now, then you can ask your employer, right? This is your rights. And second thing is in terms of the minimum, the 3 hours rule. Again, this same thing as training, right? Your employer doesn't need to pay you exact amount. It can be minimum paid, or in some cases for the they have a different method of calculating it, but still they have to pay that. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So something like this, so should you just, so if this were to happen, like if you were to go in on a Monday and this were to happen, and they said, okay, well, you know, it's slow, so go home. So should you leave it implied and then only bring it up if there's a discrepancy in the pay stub, or should you actually say, hey, by the way, like, how would you, I guess, advise something like that?
Means that, let's say, how do you know that whether they're paying or not? Is that your
Like,
question?
how do you enforce this, because, like, such that it actually materializes?
Well, it depends on the workplaces, right? Sometimes, like, they have punching card, and then if they don't pay you, but what we always ask workers to document every hour that you're working at home, right? So if they don't pay, then you can go, like, when the paychecks comes in, then you can talk about that one, right? So you have to wait until the paychecks.
Yeah, because I used to work at Future Shop, and we always used to encourage employees to enter their time as soon as they get to work. Because sometimes, you know, like the employees, they will probably forget to enter their time, but we used to encourage them to do it, like, that would be the first thing to do when you show up for your work. In that way, you will also remember that, yeah, okay, so even though, like, the employer can be home early, but I know that I will make sure that I put in my hours there. And then, if you don't see it on your pay stub, then at least you can point
Okay.
to the.
What happens sometimes, right, like nowadays workers, you can write down, mistake the time card if you like having a punching bag.
Yeah,
So
there are
what
like
happened
different
on the-
systems, they have,
That's right.
The punching?
punching, yeah, and then,
Right, and
because we
sometimes-
worked in a different system, we had we had to enter our times in the TALs, so.
If nothing, if there's no system at all, then always we would ask workers to write down on their own, right, at home. That's really, really important. When workers come to us with unpaid wages issues, we calculate based on their own record, right? And then we would ask the employer to submit, you know, their records. So if they don't provide, so whatever employees are submitting, we will ask them to pay for that. Okay?
So is that correct? If they pay cash, is it
Yes,
legal?
that's my question. Right, anything?
No,
About this
legal.
one, paying, working for cash, is it legal or illegal?
Illegal.
Illegal.
Yeah, because if you're getting paid in cash, then there is no proof that you're getting paid, and you can actually, like, you don't really need to pay the taxes. Yeah.
Alright. So how many of you say it is illegal?
I think it's relative, so it's not like babysitting was like different, like, I think, I don't know.
Does anyone say it's illegal? No?
I don't think there is like black and white. I don't think,
50,
yeah, I wouldn't,
50.
I wouldn't say it's illegal, or I wouldn't even say it's legal,
Mhm.
yeah.
Could be depending on the.
Depends on the.
Or tax environment.
Yeah,
If-
tax
like,
environment.
yeah, exactly, like, if I'm going a cab right now, I'm not gonna be able to give that taxi driver a pay stub for like the services, even though I'm the one that's employing him to get me to like the science center, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have the facilities to that, but I can pay him cash, and then we all do. So I think it's relative to like.
Maybe based on work,
Mhm.
yeah, it's legal.
Alright, so let me answer. It is
If you
legal.
received, if you received cash, I assume that you have to sign the receipt, no?
I will explain that. Okay, so it's legal to be paid in cash. Oh, that's okay, right? Because most of even a lot of workshops when they go and represent, or like that is shared or like reluctant to talk about this one, right? Cash payment, but it's okay. This is legal. You're allowed to work for cash. However, right? There's two obligations to employees and employer. If you're going to work for cash, you must get a pay slip that has your name, pay period, hours of work, and pay and deductions. This is really important, right? But this is not happening, we know that. But this is like, if you're going to work for cash, you have to make sure that you're getting that one, right? So that's the first thing. And second thing is that when you do the taxes, you have to declare that, you earn this much money. So these two things are, if you're doing that, then it's fine. So that's first thing. But what happens, but even though we say that, we all know that not every worker is following that, or not every employee is following that, right? So what happens in that case, we know that, there are some workers, because we understand why they don't want to declare that, because of tax issues and financial things, that's completely understandable. But what happens, what's the consequences if you don't do that, if you don't get this pay stuff, or if you don't have a proper record? We're not really saving a lot of money through that. But we don't really think that way, because we think that, okay, if you earn money, we have to pay taxes. But at the end of the year, how much you're going to pay? But what happens if you get injured at workplaces, right? And you're losing your CPP contributions, right? You're if something happened to your workplace, and if your employer wants to lay you off, you won't be able to get EI, right? So there's many consequences if you're not going to really do a proper paperwork. Even if you're again, it's okay to be paid in cash, but you have to do the proper works, right? That is really in the long term, that's really, really good, because I can share one example. Recently, I got a call from another worker who worked for a moving company. And so he worked for cash, right? And then he didn't claim the taxes and everything, but what he did is he got injured at workplaces. He lost his teeth. But his employer said, well, okay, don't go through anything. You're working for cash. I will pay for your expenses, but you can continue to work. So then he went to the doctor, and then doctor put some injection for the first day, and the second day the employee went with the employee, and they said, okay, don't worry, I will pay for that. The second day, then both went to the dentist to estimate how much it would take to fix his teeth and so on. So the total expenses, he gave a big bill, right, saying about $1,000. The next day, the employee disappeared, right, saying that, well, I'm not responsible for this. And then he did pick up the phone, and there's no record, proper record. So what happened, he's actually losing, right, money out of that. So what my always advice or suggestion, if you're doing, or if anybody's working for a cash, that's completely fine, but make sure that you're getting the pay stuff and doing proper work. That's always good. Yes. Sorry, you have a question, and then
No.
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone is getting paid in cash, right, and they have the proper paperwork, right? If he gets laid off, is he eligible for EI?
If he does proper paperwork,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
he can do that, because what happens, even if you're getting cash, your employer has to deduct all the deductions. So that's where the pay slip is really important. Instead of paying you check or whatever, they're paying you cash, right? But what happens still, that's a good example. There another worker who had the same issue, and she gave all her social insurance number and everything properly to the employer. The employer said, I have everything properly, you don't need to worry about it. She worked there for 5 years. So employer always was paying her cash. After 5 years, she was terminated, and when she wanted to apply for EI, employer didn't give ROE, that's fine, but we were trying to help her to apply for EI, and we explained to her, and luckily she had a lot of documentation, so that helped to prove that she worked there for this many hours, and because employer didn't know that she's doing that. So if she didn't have those, we wouldn't be able to help her, but we did. We explained to EI, but what happened when we find out, when she applied for EI, she got first denied, because the reason is they said, there's no contribution, there's no record for that from the employer. But then we helped her to understand. Then what happens in this kind of situation, if the Service Canada finds out, yes, she worked there, is everything fine, but the employer who didn't contribute to EI, then they will force the employer to pay both contributions as well.
Okay.
That happens.
And
So
even for cash paid jobs, the employer, if the employee gets terminated, employee gets laid off, the employer has to submit the ROE, right?
yes, they have to. But again, it's not easy, right? When it comes to this kind of situations. So unless you have a proper records,
Yeah.
otherwise it's really challenging. Right? So that's why we always ask workers to keep proper
So what
records.
are the deductions we have to look out for?
CPP, right? EI, taxes, right? And if your company is paying for, like if it is a unionized, union due, right? If there's any benefits or insurance, so it might be, but mandatory that CPP, Canadian Pension Plan, taxes, and EI.
So a question. Suppose there is no deduction slip, and the person gets laid off. Can they still get EI? Or
Well, again, that's just a no question, but you have rights to do that, right? You have to apply, but if you fail to prove that you worked here, and it's not just only proving, but you have to show that you worked for this many hours, you received the income, and which is the service header will look into many different angles because they have to make sure that you have enough hours, right? Even if you work there, but there's no proof to show that because what happens sometimes workers take picture of the punching card, right? So they will keep that as the proof. So that helps the service scanner to determine whether they have enough hours or not. First they have to look at that, and second thing is that if she has done every paperwork properly, then they will go after the employer to ask them to pay. But again, in that case, it's hard to tell whether you'll be accepted or not. But still, you can do that. But doesn't mean that you will get approved or not, right? Yes.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if it depends on the type of agreement, if there was a written agreement, because I've seen some contracts, if you have signed under a contractor, for example, and I have seen many employers using this to escape all the deduction and the pay after laying off their employees or not. So, if you have signed a contractor, like you are not an employee, you are a contractor, and you sign a disclaimer that you're not claiming EI, you're not claiming anything, then in this case you can't, right? You can't claim it.
Okay, let me explain that one. That's a really good point. Because in our experience, what we have seen, what is happening currently in Ontario, that's another topic, but anyway, I'll cover it with this one. Employers don't want to pay you, they don't want to contribute to the CPP UEA because they have to pay, in addition to your wages, they have to pay their portion as well. So that is a lot of expense for them. That's first thing. And I'm going to talk about further things, right, in the next topics, that your vacation pay, holiday pay and so on. So to avoid paying all these, employer can play a different role, asking you to sign as a contractor, right? Where this is mainly happening, if someone is working in a cleaning industry, truck drivers, right? It's a major industry that we have seen, right? And it's not only that, but there are other workplaces also asking employees to do that. They would ask you to sign something saying that you're a subcontractor or independent contractor because the reason is that they don't want to pay all these. So if you're an independent contractor, so there's two different things. If you're an employee, the one that I'm talking is the Employment Standard Act will apply to you, right? It will cover you. But if you're an independent contractor, you are sort of like boss, right? You're covered by the business law. The law is completely different. So for employees only, employer have to pay all these things, right? Not for the contractor because they are another employer. So for that reason, employer, would do that. So by doing so, employer is saving money. Also, they don't have more risk, if the employee wants to sue the company, or there's many other things, it's more benefits for employer. However, you are still an employee in many cases, right? If you're truly an independent contractor, that's fine. We get a call from the independent contractor as well. So if you say, no, we are independent contractor, but we're not getting paid, that's completely different. But if you're not sure, right? Let's say if someone is working for a cleaning company, doing all the works, company is giving you schedule, they are supposing you work. You are an employee, actual employee. But when it comes to law, only they are treating you as an independent contractor. So in this case, we call this as misclassification. When it comes to misclassification, we would argue with the Service Canada, or if there's any other things with the Ministry of Labour, to prove that they are not an employee, they are not an independent contractor, they are an employee. If they are employees, then they would have all these rights under the Employment Standard Act. They would have rights to get EI, they would have rights to get other things as an employee. But in that specific situation, we would have to see how to handle that. But always, like there's a lot of misclassification going in with many workplaces. So they have to decide before. If they're not too sure about that, they can give us a call and we'll be able to discuss about that. All right, any other questions? Okay, so let me move to the next one. All right. So working for cash with no deductions, right? So we already discussed about that, but I can just mention what would happen. Calculate the number of hours you worked in the last 52 weeks, and and write down days you worked. This is really important. If somebody is working for cash, do all these things, right? But not many workers comes to us with that broken records, right? So that's why we are encouraging everyone to do that and keep records, right? Records could be like, copy of the punch card, or if your employer is texting you, emailing you schedule, keep that copy, right? Collect as much as document. That would be really helpful. But many workers come to us like with empty calendar, right? It's really, really tough. And even we have seen there's a lot of workers are owed money, or they're entitled to get EI, but like in many cases not successful because they don't have enough records. Okay. All right, work hours. That's the other thing. It's really important one. Let me talk about per day, right? How many hours your employer can ask you to work? That's what I'm going to talk. But before I do we give a break or?
Oh, depend on them. The session, according to your timing, we're supposed to end at 12.
Okay.
We are having a workshop here at 1, but it's okay, pretty flexible up to 12:20.
No problem.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you need a break?
No.
Not a break?
Good. All right. Okay. So let me talk about the workers out. So I can then, I can cover more in this time, but at the same time, if I'm going to say that I'm going to ask you to stay until 8 o'clock today, that I can talk, because there's a lot of topics, right? That I can talk about minimum wage, human rights.
If you want to stay, stay, no problem. We'll have the workshop somewhere else.
That's right. For an example, that is not possible, right? The same thing may happen at workplaces, right? Your employer may ask you to work, until 8 o'clock. What would you do? What's your rights? For the workshop, of course, she can say no, right? But for the work, how many hours the maximum your employer can ask you to work?
12.
Per day?
12.
10, 12, 8.
Isn't it 8 and then isn't one night considered overtime?
Yeah.
No, not more than 8 is overtime, no.
Yes,
It's
okay.
more than
That was at
44 hours.
37.5, I guess.
That's per week, right?
Per week,
Per
yeah.
day?
Yeah.
All right, let's find out. Right, what's the maximum hours your employer can ask? 13 hours. Right, so you cannot say no, right? Yes. After 13 hours, yes, you can say no. So they cannot penalize you for that. But if you say no before, then, it's not. So you can do this. All right.
I have a
Per
question
week.
here. So usually we know that it's usually an 8-hour shift a day, right? For most of the employers. So in case of that, like the employers, if they want any employee to work 13 hours, like if that's their requirement, would it be mentioned in the contract, like the job contract?
It's not, it's not required by the Employment Standard Act, whether they have to put in the contract or not, right? But if the employer wants to do that, that's fine. But,
Because let's say when someone hires me and says that, okay, this is a full-time position, and you have to you'll have to work like 40 hours a week. But then after I join, they will ask me, okay, so you have to work like 12-hour shift or something like that. So will I be able to say no there?
I will explain that, because that will cover that. Okay?
But
Yes.
is that over 8 hours? Is that count as overtime?
Because there was a question there here too. Well, I will definitely explain what happens the overtime. I'm going to talk about that very soon. Okay? All right. Okay, so that's per day. What happens if per week?
Maximum 40 hours.
40?
48 hours.
48 hours?
Yeah.
44.
44? 45?
44.
That's 7 points.
45?
44.
44 or 48, yeah.
44 or 48?
48.
48.
Sorry? The answer can be wrong, that's fine, that's why we're here to learn, right? Alright, so maximum your employer can ask you to work per week is 48 hours, right? That could be like, there's no rule that your employer can only ask you to work Monday to Friday. Your employer can ask you to work any days, right? So that's the first thing. And the 48 hours maximum, but in some cases it can go beyond that as well, right? So which means that if your employer wants you to work more than 48 hours, yes, they can ask you to do that, but again, that's becoming optional, that you and your employer have to agree with that. If both party agrees, then only then you can work more than 48 hours per week. But then if you both agree, then what is the maximum? Can the employer ask you to work 24 hours a day in total, like, more than a certain number of hours? No, so it has to be a maximum for that as well. Can anyone say? Answer for that question. What is the maximum with your permission? Per work, per week? 50? 50?
Oh, sorry.
60?
70.
70? Alright, let's find out that.
60, yeah.
Right, 60, that's
Yeah,
right.
60.
Right answer. Okay, so the maximum your employer can only ask you to work 60 hours with your permission after 48 hours. So what happens if you do agree, then they have to take this agreement to the Ministry of Labor. So Ministry has to approve that. If the Ministry approve only for that certain time, let's say in the first agreement they can say, they can ask you to work until mid of February, then you both agree. Then Ministry has to approve until February. Then if they ask you again, then again another agreement. So it's all the time it has to be agreement. Sometimes it doesn't. But at the same time, that's where it's come to your point, where your employer can ask you to sign some contract at the beginning of the employment, that in that contract they have mentioned this one. So they may consider that as an agreement then, right? So if you're signing something now, you know, right, what, like, in terms of the maximum hours.
Sorry, my other coworker will come and attend our meeting, but I'll meet you after.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so that would happen. Any questions?
Yeah, so basically, so are you saying that, so in that initial agreement then, that maximum 60-hour clause can be overridden, or could you make an amendment?
Yeah, like in the beginning agreement, they can, like let's say, if they say that, you maximum you have to work in this company for 60 hours per
Okay.
week. So they can consider that you already agreed with that.
Okay.
So that's, yes. Any other questions? Okay, so let me move to the next one. But what happens if you're going to work for, let's say 60 hours, so more 48 hours, what would happen?
Get overtime?
Overtime, right? So the overtime comes here. Sorry, before that, it's break, right? Because if you're going to work like 13 hours per day or 48 hours per week, what is the break? So let's talk about that, then we will come to the overtime. So per day, how many hours do your employer has to give you a break or break? Or can your employer ask you to work continuously 13 hours maximum?
No, that's not possible. It's changed from before.
I think we have to get a half an hour break after 5 hours of continuous work.
Sometimes 3
For
hours.
For an 8-hour shift, I think they are eligible for 1.5 hour and 2 15-minute breaks.
Any other answers? Breaks. Okay, because that's also other, biggest question that we always get, because the break, because a lot of employees, especially again in the restaurant industry, they don't get break. Or employers don't give the break. They would ask them to work continuously because they always say it's lunchtime, busy, keep working. But the employees don't know what to do in this kind of situation. Whether they have rights to take break or not, whether they can say yes or no, they don't know. So that's what we're going to learn. What is your rights in terms of the break, right? When it comes to a day. But at the same time, before that, I was going to mention about the maximum hours. the same thing that, a lot of workers have confused. They're confused because they don't know when they can say no to employer, right? And recently I got another call, like I can share some of the examples. A worker who worked as a truck driver, his employer asked him to work the first shift. He started in the morning and he finished it around in the evening. Then he called the employer and said that, well, I'm going to change the shift, so somebody will take her. And he said, sorry, can you continue until I say, until the next shift. He said, well, I have to go because my wife. But at the same time, he thought, well, if he's going to say that, then, he may lose his job. So he didn't know when he can say no. And he said, the worker didn't come, so he had to continue. And he was about to continue, but his wife is pregnant. She's at home alone. He called him, and she wanted him to come home. But then employer asked him to continue to work, so he didn't know what to do. Whether he can say no because he already worked one shift. After how many hours, then he can say no. Then he didn't know, but then he didn't want to say no because he doesn't want to lose the employment. So he just called the employer. He was trying to explain the situation. He said, no, I don't care about that, but you have to continue. Then he didn't know anything, so he just continued. Even though he called the wife, convinced his wife, and continued. The next day morning, when he wanted to finish his shift, and then he called the employer, okay, I'm done. So now I had to go home because he started work in the morning and then he continued throughout the day and then all night the next day morning, right? Without having sleep. Yeah. So now the employer said, well, I need to finish the contract. My contract, the clients are really mad, so I wanted to finish this one. I don't have any drivers. Continue.
For more than 24 hours.
Yes.
What happened then?
So then employee decided, well, this is not going to work. I didn't sleep. I didn't do anything, and his wife was keep calling again. And then employer said, well, if you decided to go, don't come back. This is it, right? And then he was so confused because he doesn't want to lose the job because his wife is pregnant, and then they want income, so they cannot lose the job in this situation. But then he decided, what, I cannot take it anymore, and he just quit. Then employer again fired him anyway. That's a different story. And unfortunately, it's affected his wife as well, right? So this kind of issues. But what I'm trying to say here, if he knew in advance that his employer only can't ask him to work maximum 13 hours per day, he would have told employer, and employer would not have, to take any actions.
Employers are so tricky, they look for other reasons to let you go. Do you know what I mean? And I've seen that happen.
Right. But in this kind of situation, yeah. So if they're going to do that kind of thing, so you have to document. So code or anything will look at the patterns.
Yeah, but who has that much? Even though I am a lawyer, who has that much time to go to court? When you're looking to make ends meet on a daily basis, hardly anyone.
Yeah, it is not easy. Always, it's it's tough to prove it, but always we've asked the workers to document it. But again, it's challenging. It's
But
not.
can the employer terminate the employee because of that? Because he refused to work after his 24-hour shift?
That was wrong. The
That
employer,
was wrong,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
He cannot fire the employee
No, he cannot.
based on that.
That was the wrongful dismissal. So
As
then-
a driver, you should have 13 hours of driving, 14 hours on duty, and 10 hours of off-duty time. He's not supposed to work 24 hours if he's driving.
Yeah.
It's a health issue.
Exactly. So he explained that, but then employer didn't do that, and the employee in a situation where he couldn't lose his job. Yeah. Right. All right. Okay. So now let's move to the break now. Okay. So the break again the same thing. Always when employers are saying that you're not allowed to take break, so employees don't know what to do. So let's find out after how many hours your employer have to give you break per day. Right. Today, after every 5 hours, the employer has to give you at least 30 minutes break.
Okay.
So that is the law. Again, let's say if your employer asking you to work for 10 hours, so how many breaks your employer has to give you?
Two 30
Two-
minutes.
two 30 minutes break?
break, yeah.
How
Well,
many-
30 minutes breaks for
30
sure.
minutes break?
Yeah, that's for sure. And
They
they're also eligible for some
Yeah,
15 minutes.
30
right?
minutes.
The 15 minutes is not like not in their employment standard, but most of the employer keeps because they
Yeah.
don't want their employees to get tired and to like that's the moment. So if your employer is giving you more break, that's fine. But if not, this is the norm. But for the 10 hours, you only can get 1 hour, one break, 30 minutes.
Sorry.
If your employer asks you to work for 10 hours, you will only
After 30
get
minutes,
10,
another 5 hours starts, right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so 10
Yeah,
hours.
and
10 minutes.
what if my shift only like 5 hours?
So then your employer doesn't need to give you any break.
Depends on your employer. If he's a nice employer, he will still
Yeah,
give you
right.
15 minutes.
It happened to me.
Yeah, because, well, it depends on the
Pretty good.
employer
Yeah.
actually, yeah.
And then, so then
I'll
that's
see your
mean that,
coworkers.
so then I don't need to give you a break, so now that makes sense, right? Okay, alright, so the thing is now, what happens for this break? Whether are you paid or not?
No, unpaid.
We got it paid.
No, it should
It's not
be
relevant
paid.
to me, but why would it-
30 minutes.
What does the Employment Standard Act say?
It should be paid.
Should be paid?
Hmm.
Alright, let's find out. Well, it's unpaid,
Unpaid.
right? It's unpaid for the break. Some employers pay, that's fine, but they don't need to. Alright, now let's talk about the time off. But again, that's for the day. How about per week? If you're going to work per between 2 shifts. So let's talk about between 2 shifts, and then we can talk about per week. So let's say in that example, employer, he, that driver, he finished his shift. Then if employer wants to ask him to work for the next shift, in between 2 shifts, how many hours he does give it to the
I
employee?
think it's 10 hours. I think 10 hours.
10
Not
hours?
11, yeah.
10, 11, 12,
8.
8 hours? There you go, right? 11 hours. Your employer has to give you 11 hours break in between 2 shifts. I guess that's also. Right. So that's per day, I mean, between 2 shifts. How about per week? If you're going to work continuously, right? Your employer can ask you to work maximum 48 hours to 60 hours. So which becomes, if you really do the math, it could be, 6 or 7 days, I don't know yet, but how many, then what will happen? Can your employer ask you to work 7 days per week? Maximum 13 hours per day? Or do they have to give you any, I mean,
Again, it cannot exceed like 60
The
hours.
maximum is 6 days a week.
maximum 60, yes. But then, what's the rule? Because let's say, for example, if your employer asking you to work for 12-hour shift, right? So then when they sum up with the, like, all hours, if you reach the 60 hours, but still, they may sometimes play without giving the proper break in between 2 shift or the next week. So what is the rule? So it's saying that the employer has to give you in a week 24 hours, right? So consecutive hours off each week, which means 1 day off. It doesn't need to be the full day, but it can be start from the night to the next day, but 24 hours must be off. Right? That is per week, between 2 weeks. Now it comes to overtime. Overtime, when it comes to an overtime, when you work more hours. So when the overtime starts, there's 2 questions. One, when the overtime starts, and second, whether do we have some rights to get extra pay for that? Right? Can anyone answer when the overtime? That's okay.
Isn't it pay 1.15?
1.15?
It's time and a half.
Time, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Time.
Yeah.
That's right. Time and a half, right? So your employer has to pay you time and a half for the overtime, right? So which means if you're working for $10, for example, then you'll be paid $15 per hour for the overtime. So then when the overtime starts, after how many hours?
After
After
34 hours.
44.
After 44 hours?
No, after 37.5 hours.
No.
After 37.5 hours?
It's 44.
After 40 hours?
It's
Alright, so,
44.
yeah, per week after 44 hours, your overtime will stop. Again, it's time and a half, right, regular pay. I just want to explain one more thing here. It's not like very popular, but it's also really important to know that your employer has two methods to calculate overtime. They can either calculate the overtime based on the regular base, which is this one, or the other one is called averaging overtime. Averaging overtime means your employer can say, well, you know, we will pay you overtime, or we will calculate overtime after like every 2 weeks. In every 2 weeks, if you work 88 hours every 2 weeks, whatever hours you are working for more than 88 hours, then you will pay you overtime. Right? Does it make sense? Because 1 week is 44, 2 weeks 88 hours, right? Seems to us it makes sense, but that is correct. Your employer can do that, but it is benefit for employer, not for you. You actually
Yeah,
losing
because
something.
it can be 40 hours 1 week and then 48 hours the other week or whatever, like, it can be like
Yeah,
that.
let's say if somebody is working for 30 hours first week,
Yeah,
and then 50 hours next week, it's
Mhm.
80 hours. If the employer wants to calculate based on averaging,
Yeah,
you're
then
not
he
getting
doesn't have
overtime,
to pay the
it's not
overtime,
88,
yeah.
but you're losing
But,
actually
yes,
getting overtime,
yeah.
6 hours there, right? So, but that is also legal, your employer can ask you to do that. But how do you know that, you know, whether your employer is going to pay you this way or the other way? If your employer wants to pay you the averaging method, so they have to get a written permission from you, you have to agree with that. If there's no agreement, they have to follow this one, right? That's for the overtime pay. And again, they can do the same method, like for every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they can do that. Right? So you should know in advance if your company is asking you to sign something at the beginning. So this one also they mention in their agreement. Well, our company pays you over, like they calculate overtime based on this. So now you know what does mean, right? Because like if you don't know, then there's a possibility of like losing money if they're going to give you more overtime in the company, right? All right. Any questions? Okay. Let me move to the next one. So unpaid overtime is a big problem. So the Workers Action Center also, we get thousands of calls regarding that overtime. A lot of overtimes issues. The workers don't get paid. So you can see 1.27 billion in unpaid, right? That was in 2010, but it's been long time. I don't have a current one, but that is happening. The reason is, like, you need to know your rights now, and if that's happening, you can let us know. Okay. Right, let me move to the next one. Now vacation. The vacation, because after overtime, like if you work overtime, you will get tired, right? So what we will be looking for, we need a vacation. So then what is the vacation? Like how many days that we have vacation in Ontario? How it works?
I
think 3
weeks.
First year,
It
after
depends.
the 3
Yeah, it
weeks,
depends. 2 weeks.
again, it depends on the
It
employer.
depends. After
But I
5
think it's
years.
after the
One week.
first year.
After the first year,
Or was it 1 week?
1 week.
3 weeks.
I thought it was
First year, 3 weeks.
Okay, let me explain how it works. So the first thing is time off, like how many weeks, and second thing about how much, whether it's paid or not, the vacation time off. Right? It's always confused. Okay, the first thing, let me explain about the pay for the vacation. Every employee have rights to get vacation pay. Since like every dollar you're earning, right? You are earning 4% of every single dollar you're earning as a vacation pay, right? Means that, let's say I'm going to find a new job. So I'm starting tomorrow. I'm working only for 2 days and I quit because I don't like it. In that case, let's say I work for 16 hours in total. My employer agreed to pay $80. I'm sorry, $10 per hour, just for an example. So how much I should be paid at the end of my employment, and just for those 2 days?
Basically, your hour for 16
Yeah, 16 hours
and
times 10.
4% off.
Right, so 160, but that's not the only one. In addition to that, the 4% of 160 as well,
That's right.
as a vacation. right? But not many workers really think about that, or they don't really care about that.
Yeah.
But that is your right, regardless of whether you quit or you've been fired, doesn't matter. Like, you know, you don't need to wait for such sometimes to get the vacation pay. Vacation pay starts right away, right? So this vacation pay, the 4%, if you're a full-time employee, if you continue to work for a year, what happens if you accumulate this total amount, the 4%, it will be roughly equal to your 2 weeks of pay, right? So that's why we say you have rights to get 2 weeks vacation. But what exactly, like this is how it works, the 4%. But then this pay can be paid on every paycheck. So if your employer is going to pay you on every paycheck in addition to your wages as a vacation, they have to mention that. So if they're paying you, when you take time off for vacation, your employer doesn't need to pay for that. But you can agree with your employer saying that, you know, I don't want to be paid on every paycheck this vacation pay. You can keep that and pay me when I take time off. So in that case, only you can get vacation pay when you take time off. So that's about the payment vacation. That is our rights under the Employment Standard Act. But second thing is about the time off, how it works. So let's say I want to take a vacation next month. Can my employer give me the vacation time off or not? Right? So, well, how it works that you have rights to require that. You can ask your employer, well, you know, I need time off. But that up to your employer to decide when to say yes or no. So that's first thing. Second thing is that for the first year, your employer doesn't need to give you any time off. So they can ask you to work continuously without taking any vacation for the first year. Still, they have to pay you the vacation pay, right? So payment, they must, but the time off, not really for the first year. But from the second year, yes, they have to give you vacation time off. But the vacation, when they give you time off, again, it's up to the employer. You have rights to ask, and they have to decide whether or not to accept it, right? So that is about the time off, yes.
Explain this time off, the vacation time. What are you referring?
So let's say I'm working in a company for 1 year. So I just completed 1 year. This is my second year. I wanted to take time off, like vacation, my vacation time off to go to different country.
Okay, so you're getting 2 weeks for that.
It is not every time, right? So if you're a part-time employee, when you they will calculate based on that 4%. So if based on the calculation, how many days you are allowed, eligible, they will decide based on that. The maximum is 2 weeks if you really calculate that way, right? But it doesn't mean always 2 weeks.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So time off now is whatever days.
Like the 4% is like how much you have earned, and based on that they will decide. Right? Any other questions? Okay, so let me move to the next one.
You get vacation pay for training also.
Yes. For any payment that you're receiving, right, as a wages, your employer has to pay you vacation pay as well. All right. Does anybody want to? Did you read that?
After 1 year of working with the same employer, you are entitled to take off 2 weeks of paid vacation. Your employer can tell you when you can take your vacation, or your employer can make you take your vacation in less than 1 week increments.
And if you don't take your paid vacation, then you are entitled to 4% of gross wages as vacation pay. So I thought it was a very main.
One moment.
Yes.
No, I'm just trying to take the notes.
Can you have this email to us, this presentation, is it allowed or? No, can we get a print copy?
I have a booklet.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you.
But how about if you don't, if you take vacation, but no pay, you don't want it? Can you take?
If you don't take vacation time off, that's fine. If your employer agree with that, but they still have to pay. They cannot say no.
No, I mean before 1 year, that's not.
They still have
you
to pay
haven't
you.
completed 1 year, you wanna take vacation, it's still you're eligible for the payment or no?
For the vacation pay, that always starts to begin in from every dollars, right? So let's say the second year you're taking vacation time off, like when you take vacation of they have to, like again, if your employer is paying you on every paycheck, you're not getting any pay for those time off. If you're not being paid on every paycheck, then when you take time off, your employer has to pay you.
For example, you're working as an e-worker. After 3 months or 6 months, you have an emergency, back home, something, you want to take 2 weeks off. So how about this?
Employer doesn't need to give you that time off.
But you have emergency, somebody is, deceased, passed away. You have to go. Your uncle, your aunt, somebody,
Death in the family.
Yes, unfortunately, the emergency leaves that's completely another one, but I can just quickly answer for that. In Ontario, there's only 10 emergency days only for certain companies. If you're working in the biggest companies, if you're working in a small companies, there's no such things. Very unfortunately, unless you have a personally your medical conditions, right? If your doctor is advising you to take some time off, that sort of medical things, that's completely different.
But is
But
that
if-
okay with big companies, as you said? Or
Then you have to find out, yeah, some of them, and some company may have their own policy. They may give you that, so that you have to figure out. Yes. Okay. The next one is public holidays. How many public holidays in Ontario?
My birthday.
My birthday too. Yes. Canada Day? Sorry. 11? Any answers? 9? Uh-huh. Alright, so there are only 9 days. Can you name them? Mhm.
Family Day.
Family Day.
Good Friday.
Good Friday.
Easter.
Victoria Day.
Civic holiday.
No,
Canada Day.
not civic holiday.
Canada
Canada Day.
Thanksgiving.
Canada Day.
Thanksgiving.
I feel like Canada Day. I'm trying to do them
Yeah,
in order.
we're still in July.
Canada Day.
Christmas.
August civic holiday, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas Day, Boxing Day.
Boxing Day is not.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Oh.
Boxing Day.
It is.
Sometimes
in
Remembrance Day, it depends,
Remembrance
government, I
Day.
think.
Yeah.
Well, for government,
Yeah.
but these are the required ones, right? These are ones that everybody's supposed to get.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's find out that. See whether it is right or not. There you go.
Yeah, Victoria Day.
Boxing Day.
Alright.
Here it is, not in the.
But the civic, but the civic day is not there. The civic day is not there.
It's
Sorry?
not.
No.
No, civic.
You don't get it for every place that you work
Yeah.
at.
The reason is, right, sometimes you may see civic holiday, for the civic holiday, banks are closed, right? The reason is that it's for federal workers,
Okay.
right? Remembrance Day for federal workers,
But
right?
for federal workers, some of them don't get family day because they're federal.
Yeah, so the federal workers, they
They
don't
just
have the
want-
same
yeah.
thing, right? So
So
that's,
it's one
that's
or
why it's
the
like for
other.
10% of those workers have completely different. Okay. Okay, so what happens, so we're talking about public holidays, but what is our rights for public holidays? Whether your employer can ask you to work for the day, and if they ask you to work on that day, what is your right? Like how much they have to pay you? And if you don't work on that day, how much they have to pay you? That is like important that we need to know. So first, let me ask you, whether they have to pay you, like if you don't work on that day. Let's say family day is coming, right, in February. I'm not going to work, right? Our office is closed. Whether I will get paid for that or not, I'm eligible for that. Okay. All right, so this is for all workers. We all have rights to get a holiday pay, even if you don't work on that day. However, there's the condition that you, in order to get the holiday pay, you must have worked the shift before the holiday and shift after the holiday, not the day before, not the day after, right? Shift, according to your shift,
Yes.
right? Whichever came first and then after, right? If you work those 2 days, then you earn. But if you don't work one of these days for that specific holiday, you will not get it. If your employer wants to pay you, that's fine, but if not, they don't need it, right? So that's for the holiday. That if you don't work. But if you do work
On the holiday?
on the holiday,
Time and a half, exactly.
Double time.
double time, Uh-huh.
It's time and a half.
It's, no, I think, yeah, I think
It's time and a half.
regular plus time and a half.
Okay, so let's find out. What happens for the hours that you work on that day, holiday, let's say family day, I'm going to work on the day,
Yeah.
right? So my employer has to pay me not the regular wages, they have to pay instead, they have to pay time and a half of the
Yeah.
hours that I worked, right? In addition to that, like, you know, whether or not I get public holiday, whether or not I work or not, I still would have got the public holiday pay as well. So that is, like, in addition to that, it's going to be about 2.5.
Yes, that's true.
Right, so if you're earning $100 per day, for that day, if you work, $250, right? So that is your rights for the holiday. But how do they calculate the holiday pay? Like, if you don't work on that day. So they will go back your 4 weeks prior to their holiday weeks, and whatever you earn, divided by 20. That will, like, if you're a full-time employee, if you really do the math, it will be roughly about your 1 day pay. That's why we always say you will get 1 day pay for that, right? But it's not always. Okay? So that's first thing. And second thing is that if you work to a time at 2.5. So what about if you don't work? Sorry, if you are working 2 or 3 jobs, what's your rights? Can you get a holiday pay from every place?
Well, I don't think it would actually work out because you're representing this person yourself to all these things, so you don't necessarily, you may not be committing to be able to work with you before and after.
Depends on the shift.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Any answers? Okay, so how it works that, yes, you are an employee to every places. You have rights to get a holiday pay from every places, right? Again, that will, like, you know, when they consider the shift before and shift after, let's say if you're working somewhere for full time Monday to Friday, other place Saturday, Sundays, and third place is just only weeknight, Tuesday and Wednesdays, right? So in that case, when the holiday comes, the employer may say, well, let's say if the holiday falls on Friday, they can say you never work, like for Saturday, Sunday working place. They may say that you never work on Fridays. That's only for the full-time workers. They may say that, but it's not correct. Right? Still, you have rights to get the holiday pay for, even though you never work on Fridays. If you're working on Saturdays, Sundays, your shift is before the holiday was previous Sunday, and the next shift will be on Saturday. So if you work those 2 days, you still have rights to get a holiday pay. But again, the calculation, how much you would get it, would be different than the full time, right? The same, like based on the calculation from the part time, so they would pay you that. Same thing for the third job as well. So that, but again, we get a lot of calls, not even from the full time employment, they don't get paid for the holiday, right? If they sometimes what the employer do, they only pay for time and a half if you work on the day, which is not correct. So that's the first thing. And second thing is that some employers may say that, you know, in order to get this holiday pay, you must have worked in this company for 3 months. If you've been working there only less than 3 months, you wouldn't qualify. Employers may say that, but which is not correct, right? Since once you started work, your holiday pay also you ended with the holiday pay as well.
So, but in this case, 1 day shift after and before doesn't make sense if you're eligible for 2, 3, places. So what does it mean in this case, 1 day after and before?
It's not the day before, day after. It's shift before and shift after.
It depends on your schedule.
Okay.
Got it?
Some agencies, they don't pay during 3 months, it's starting. Some agencies, they don't pay during starting 3 months. So after 3 months, they will pay.
Yeah, the temp agencies, they were not paying holiday pays. But again, we had a campaign back in 2007, we won that. Sorry, in 2009, we won that, and we, now it is mandatory. The employer, so the temp agency also have to pay. They don't need to wait for 3 months, which is not correct. If they're doing that, that is wrong, right? If that's happening, let us know. Then we can discuss about that. Okay, so that is for the holiday pay. Any other questions? Okay, that's all, we already discussed about that, working on public holiday. All right, so now it comes to an end of your employment. Can someone? Yeah, please go ahead.
Mary worked for her employer for 4 years. Suddenly one Friday, Mary's boss told her not to come back on Monday as business was slow. Is Mary entitled to any wages?
That's
Yes,
been
she
the
does.
employer is
Is it
terminating
laying
you
off?
permanently.
Yeah, I agree with her. I think it is laying off, so shouldn't she, be entitled to receive, I guess,
Compensation.
yeah, that's
Two
the
weeks.
code on her,
2 weeks for each year.
2 weeks per
such
year.
that she can apply for EI. She should be, yeah.
All right, so let's explain what is your rights when the employment comes to an end, right? So while you are working, you would face the public holiday, overtime, vacation, so and so during while you're working. But when it comes to an end, you have rights to get something, right? So what is that? So that's what I'm going to explain. That's called the termination, right? You have rights to get a notice or pay, right? So there are two things I have to explain here. First, the termination. The second one, severance. I will talk about the severance next, but before that, I will explain about the termination. Termination means if your employer is telling you that you'll be terminated permanently, they have to give you notice in advance. In writing, they have to let you know. If they do that, they don't need to give you extra pay for the termination. Or if they don't give you enough notice, then they have to give you some pay, both of them, a combination of that, right? So let me explain how it works. So if you're working in a company more than 3 months, if you're working only for 3 months, you're not entitled for that. Your employer doesn't need to give you termination notice or pay. If you've been there for more than 3 months, if you've been there less than a year, then you're entitled to get 1 week of pay or notice, right? If you've been there for 2 years, 2 weeks, 3 years, 3 weeks, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, no.
Yeah.
Right? Right? The maximum is 8 weeks. Even though you've been there for more
after
than
12
8
years, you don't need to work then.
That's right? So your employer has to give you, right, maximum. If you've been there more than 8 years, then maximum is 8 years. Sometimes they would only give you 2 weeks of notice. So in that case, if you've been there for more than 2 years, then you would get termination pay the extra. Right? That is your rights. However, if you quit or if you're fired, you're not entitled to this one. You may not. Doesn't mean that you're not always, because what happens? This is why employer, they give you hard time because they don't want you to pay extra. So they don't want to. So what happens? They may give you hard time, it could be there are different reasons for bullying, harassment, and other things, but they may force you in a different way to quit because, let's say, if the company has hundreds of employees, they have to pay a lot of money, right, for all the employees. So if they're just making you to quit, so then they will say you quit, so that's why you are not entitled to get the termination pay. But which is in that case, we get a lot of workers. They come to us, and then we try and help with them to get this termination pay, even though they quit or they fired, right? But not all the time. If that's the employee's fault, then it's no. But if not the employee's fault, then there's a possibility, right?
Like the truck driver that you mentioned, yeah?
Yeah.
Give you a hard time.
Yeah.
How about the contract? Sometimes they took a contract and this month and then they don't do 1 week to 8 weeks, so how about the contract?
It's a really good question. For the contract, right? If you sign a contract saying that you only work for a 1 year contract, in that case, that contract is considered as a notice. If you have that the contract, so then they don't need to give you notice. But if they want to lay you off before the contract ends, then they have to give you the notice. If they don't give you, then they have to give you pay, not termination pay. Yes.
I have 2 questions. So there's 2 weeks notice for termination, right?
It's not 2 weeks.
No, the notice for, let's say if my employer wants to terminate me,
Right.
right? Does he need to give me a 2 weeks notice before the termination date, prior to the?
They can't terminate you right away on the same day.
No, that's what I'm saying. So let's say if they want to terminate me, they have to give me the notice 2 weeks prior to that day, like my last day of work. Right?
Yeah, that is not 2 weeks exactly. Again, as I said, how long you've been there. So based on the years that they have to give in advance, so they have to, right? But that's why if they don't give you, they can terminate you without giving you that. But instead of giving you a notice, then they have to pay termination.
Okay. There is another thing. Let's say someone works for 5 months, right? And that person gets terminated in the middle of the week. Let's say that person is scheduled for the whole week, Monday to Friday. But then on Wednesday, the employer says, okay, we're running slow, so you won't be able to fill you or whatever. So you don't need to come from tomorrow, but we will pay you for the rest of this week, which is 2 more days, which you're not coming. Is
Well,
that right?
no, if the person was there for 5 years, so 5 months, then he or she is entitled for a week of notice or pay. So in that case, they're only paying you only for 2 days.
Yes.
So then still they have to give you, they should have paid him 1 week, so
Okay,
5 days.
until the next. Now, is it same for all employers, or it depends on the company? Like big company, small company?
The rules is for every companies.
Okay.
So all employees have to follow this one. But however, we see a lot of employees
Yeah.
still manage it. Yeah. So this for all the business. So this is termination, right? And over in the booklet also you will see that. So okay, so that any other questions for termination?
Okay.
So the next one is severance. So this is the other one, right? If your employer wants to terminate you, right? So they have to give you first thing the termination pay or notice. Let's say they give you notice, you're there for 7 years. If they give you 7 weeks in advance notice, so they don't need to give you anything, right? Even though you've been there for 7 years, like when they lay you off, they don't need to give you that. But the next one is severance. How this works is that in order to qualify for this one, you must have worked in this company for at least 5 years. If you work less than 5 years, you're not entitled qualified for this one, severance. But that's not the only one. Even if you work for more than 5 years, 5 years or more, if the company doesn't have 2.5 million in payroll, then you will not get it.
How do you know something like that? Like an annual report, I guess?
That would be one reason, way of finding. If not, if the company has about 75 to 100 employees, if they're working for minimum wage, so you can calculate roughly, it will be about 2.5 million payroll. But again, it's hard sometimes. We consider sometimes if the company has about more than 60 employees, then we would still file a claim, right? So they have to prove, if they don't have that, so then, because they would have, the employer has to have their paperwork, right, with the revenues, and they would be able to prove that whether they have it or not. So sometimes what happens, sometimes we are not sure about that. So we will file a claim, and then ministry will ask them to submit it, and then if they find out they don't have it, they're not qualified for severance. So if they're qualified for severance, if the company has, if the company is big enough to pay severance, and then if you work there for again 5 or more years, then you are qualified for that. Then how much and how many, right? So how it works again, 1 week per year, right? If you work 5 years, 5 weeks of pay as a severance in addition to the termination, right? So severance again, 8 years, 8 weeks, 12 years.
8 weeks.
12 years?
8 weeks.
I think it's no, severance is probably 12 weeks. It's probably.
Yeah, severance is maximum 26 weeks.
No. Number of years?
Years,
In
yes.
weeks.
That's correct. So termination, and the other one is severance. Again, this severance, if you're there for about 20 years, we would always ask the workers to check with the lawyer, because this is minimum what I'm talking, 1 week per year, right? The lawyer may find out like through a different law, like under the common law and different laws, they can ask more, like twice a week, 2 weeks per year or 4 weeks per year maximum, right? So they can go up to that level. So that is possible for severance pay. Again, if you quit or if you're fired, your employer doesn't need to pay you that. So that's why employer always, would they don't want to pay you that, so they may force you to quit. So this is why they do that. Okay, so that is severance pay. All right. So now I'm just going to, I know time is 12 almost, but I can just quickly talk about our campaign and membership next. If anybody wants to leave 12, that's fine, right? Are you okay to
Let
stay?
me ask a question.
Sure.
When I suggested harassment earlier. The harassment I was thinking about is when the employees force me to quit. How can you handle that?
Well, it depends. So what happens? I can quickly share how it works and how the workers handle this kind of situation with workers. We get calls workers are facing harassment workplaces or bullying. It's a tough one to prove. But when workers comes to us, almost at the end, if they don't have a proper records or proper things, it's very hard. But if workers comes in early, then we would be able to tell them what steps that they can do, right? Let's say if you're facing harassment based on, it could be different reasons. So you can document by sending an email to your employer seeing that what your concerns are, right? But it may raise more issues with your employer, so employer doesn't want to see that, so they may freak out and they may fire you, or they want to resolve it. Or if they don't, you have some documents at that point,
Can
right?
you make some kind of arrangement with the employers? Instead of firing me, instead of terminating me, it's gonna jeopardize my chances of getting another job. Could we agree that you just lay me off indefinitely or something like that?
I mean, you don't have right to ask to lay you off. That means they will consider you quitting it. That's
Quitting.
up to you. Yeah, if you wanted to, because we cannot ask someone employer to lay me off, right? But so they can say yes, if you want to lay off, we can keep you, but that means you are quitting it. They can say that.
No, I
But
don't wanna
if you see that kind of issues, what next that you in how the unionized workplaces handle? So the workers, they would take to the union rep, saying what kind of issues, or HR, right, human resources. You can complain to them what is happening. You can request to have a meeting with it could be from a coworker, it could be from a manager, or it could be from the employer. It could be from anybody. So each and every things are different. Each and every cases are different. So you can ask the employer to have a meeting, trying to resolve it. That's the best way to handle it. But again, it's always practically, it's not always it's happening. The employer gets mad. They find many different reason to blame on you, or they can find out a way to terminate you. Recently, I think yesterday I got a call from.
Instantly. My issue is do not jeopardize my future because you want to let me go. It's okay if you want to let me go from this job. It's your job. Thank you very much for the time I spent here. But leave the door open so that when I apply for another job, you don't tell the new employee that I quit my job. And in fact, you're the one who wanted me out. Or I had an attitude or something, some kind of excuse.
Yeah.
Just leave me that.
Definitely, you can. Yeah. You definitely can request that from the employer, but it comes to the employer, up to the employer whether there's no problem with you. Yeah, sure. Okay. So let me just quickly okay. Right. So yeah. Yeah. So so then I will maybe discuss with you about that later. So I'm
Alright.
just going to quickly move to the next one, and then we can wrap up. All right. So so we see here some of the issues like what would you do next if something happened at workplaces? If you see a problem at workplaces, like if you don't get vacation pay, if you don't get overtime pay, if you don't get holiday pay, what would you do? The options are you can file a claim at the Ministry of Labor, right? If you don't get any of the wages, you can file a claim at the Ministry of Labor. To file a claim at the Ministry of Labor is free. You don't need to pay any fee, and 2 years to make the complaint. And there's the employer will, so they have to. The Ministry of Labor officer will do the investigation to find out whose fault is it, and they will order to pay. They find out there's some money owed, right? So that is one option for the Ministry of Labor. Okay. And the second one, so this is the website of the Ministry of Labor. Okay, don't worry that you have the details here in this booklet about the Ministry of Labor, and then phone number as well. So next one, if not, the second one is the code, is a small claims code where you can file a claim. But then here you have to pay a small fee for that complaint, and again the same 2 years deadline. Actually, the Ministry of Labor deadline was 6 months before last year February. So from the last year February 20th, so they made a change to 2 years, which is really good. But the small claims code also have 2 years deadline, and the maximum that you can claim here 25,000 in the small claims code. But if the Ministry of Labor used to be only 10,000 that you can claim, but now there's no limit. You can claim as much as you can, right? And here there are some risks. If you lose, you may have to pay employer expenses sometimes, right? So that's the risk here. And you don't need to have you already have a lawyer for small claims court. You can represent yourself. Okay. So in this case, it's kind of situation that the documents is really important. Right? And so what would you do if anything happens? Again, like as I already mentioned, keep record of everything, document everything relevant, what happened, when it happened, where it happened, right? What was said or done, and who said or did it, right? And who saw what happened, what you did do or say at the time, right? So these are the details. It's really helpful, but it doesn't mean that always is enough. But at least you would have this kind of information. It's really helpful. Okay. Okay. Now just going to go to the next one. As I talked about the campaign. But before I go into this one, any other questions you have? No. Okay. I'm going to move to this one. So this is the current campaign that we have. It's called 15 and Fairness. So 15 is of course for the minimum wage, and fairness is not just only the minimum wage, but also we are asking the government to make it better, the conditions, right? Under that 15, under the fairness, you can if you go to our website, our campaign website, that's the website address, where you can find out more about the demands, what are the demands that we have under the fairness. Here you can see some of the pictures that we had some rallies, right? It's from the last year, right? Members and allies, we had a rally in downtown, and yeah, I'm just going to show you some pictures, right? What we have done so far in the minimum wage campaign, right? So this is previous one. Here are some actions. Again, the other action. Okay. Looking for myself.